Yes, we have that down. We have that down, baby. We have it down.
Let's go. Let's go. All right, welcome back to the college football podcast. Wait, not college football. I mean, we're mainly college football podcast. The Crowd Chatter podcast. Close enough. We cover a lot of college football on here, and that is what we will continue to do today. So if you haven't seen it yet, go check out the USC UCLA / Kevin Durant video. That is one we just recorded. It is a good one because it is big news. Moving away from that, we're going to move into continuing our win totals videos. We are going to start today with the ACC Atlantic Division. Starting off with the ACC Atlantic champions last year, the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Their schedule includes VMI, well, he was the Virginia Military Academy. You got at Vanderbilt, then you got Liberty at home, and then you open ACC play at home versus Clemson, which is going to be a huge, important game. Then you go on the road to play Florida State. You got Army at home. You got Boston College at home. Then you go on the road to Louisville and NC State. You've got North Carolina and Syracuse at home, and then the trap game of the year at home on the road against Duke. Such a scary game. Wake Forest win total is sitting here at, I just saw it, 8.5. So to go over, they would need to go 9-3, and to go under, they would go 8-4. Realistically, I see over. I see probably 9 wins for this team at worst. I mean, the first 3 games, I think they'll win easily. I don't know how Liberty's going to be now that Malik Willis is gone. Vanderbilt is Vanderbilt. VMI. That's all I have to say. Then you got your home games, Army and Boston College, and North Carolina and Syracuse. You should win all 4 of those. And then Clemson at home is a toss-up because you do have them at home, but you just never know because Clemson's, Clemson. I figure they're not going to be bad for that much longer. And then you got your road games. Out of at Florida State and at Duke, I think they win both of those. I think those will really be the determining factor for if they go over and under, if they trip up in one of those. And then at Louisville and at NC State. Even if you lose both of those and the Clemson game, at worst case, that's still 9-3. I still think that's pretty solidly over at 9-3. I think realistically the losses are Clemson and NC State, and then maybe Louisville. But I think it'll be safely at least 9-3. So give me the over for Wake Forest.
Yeah, I don't know much about Wake Forest team because I don't really necessarily pay a crap ton of attention to just ACC teams in general. Like I know Clemson pretty well. I know their team should have a really good season, but I don't know much about Wake Forest. I don't even know. I think they still have Sam Hartman, the quarterback from last year, right?
That's why I'm saying they're probably still going to be pretty good. They got Sam Hartman still, so
So
outside of the rest of the ACC, the rest of the ACC is weak.
I mean, you look at their schedule. Their toughest games are the Clemson one, of which I'll give to the Tigers because that's what I think the Clemson could very well return to glory this year. I think this could be their season of where they come back. Not that they'll win a championship, but seeing how the ACC is, they should. I think they'll end up winning it. Louisville's team next year will be really good, but this is not going to be their season. They still will be solid, and it's not going to be an easy game on the road for Wake Forest. But I still would probably take Wake in that one. NC State, I guess I'll give that one to the Wolfpack. But this whole the ACC, everything's just really a toss up because even at Florida State's not a good team, but it's still a road game and nothing in the ACC ever makes any sense. So anything's ever really possible in this conference. So it's very hard to really predict like what on earth anyone's gonna do on any given day. But realistically, the over under was 8.5. So I'm gonna go. I mean, I'm gonna stick with probably over. I'll give them at least 9 wins. You know, they won't lose to Duke. I think they'll beat Syracuse. I would hope. I mean, they're not. I mean, Syracuse is well.
Okay, almost lost to Syracuse last year, so that's all I'm saying. It was a carrier dome. So
Yeah, and that's another reason why I think they should easily win. North Carolina no longer has Sam Howell. Boston College, not that special. Army, I don't think that game is going to be 60-50 this year, or no, 70-50 this year. Liberty no longer has Malik Willis. Vandy's not good. VMI, who cares? So I think the most of their games on their schedule they should win. The only question marks are really like Clemson, Louisville, and NC State, and I'll give them one of them. So I mean 9-3, 10-2. I'll go with it. I'll go with 9-3 because that's the lowest I could see them going. And they could lose
Exactly.
at Louisville, so I see them maybe getting upset in one game. So I'll give them 9-3. So just over.
Exactly. Now we move to the second place team from last year, the NC State Wolfpack, returning Devin Leary, who is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. So I have high hopes for this NC State team. We have their record or their schedule starting at East Carolina. Then they got Charleston Southern and Texas Tech, and they got UConn to round out the non-conference. Go on the road to play Clemson. Then you got Florida State on the road to play Syracuse. Virginia, Wake, and Boston College at home, and then on the road to end against Louisville and North Carolina. Their win total is 8.5, just like Wake Forest. I'm going to stick with over on them. I think Clemson is definitely a loss on the road. It's going to be very tricky for NC State to win. And then I see them maybe tripping up in one or two out of Syracuse, Louisville, or North Carolina, because there's always that game where one team goes to the Carrier Dome, just like basketball. Just that one game where everybody one team goes to the Carrier Dome and somehow loses a game they shouldn't. This is the Carrier Dome effect, but I don't think it's the Carrier Dome anymore. But realistically, I still think they should get 9 to 10 wins. I would say the hardest game is at Clemson. Other than that, maybe Louisville, maybe North Carolina on the road, but I see 9-3 at least for this team.
Yeah, well, same case for NC State, I believe, as Wake Forest. I think most of their team is still returning. I believe their quarterback from last season is coming back again, correct?
Yeah, Devin Leary for the quarterback. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's back again as well. So, I mean, you look at NC State's schedule, a road game against ECU ain't going to mean anything. They should beat Charleston Southern, Texas Tech, new head coach, not really a great team anyway.
Watch
UConn,
out for that
they're
UConn game.
UConn's
Watch out for that UConn
garbage.
game.
No,
You
no.
can't.
You can't doesn't even you can't has Jim Mora now as their head coach. No, no, no. um, and then the next game is at Clemson. I give as a loss. Fresno State they'll win. Syracuse, it's the carrier or no, it's not the Carrier Dome. I don't know what it is
Carry
now,
on
but
anymore.
at Syracuse, still a tough game. I still would give it to NC State. VT, I think they'll knock off the Hokies. Wake Forest, that's kind of in the air. I think that's anybody's game. Then you got Boston College at Louisville at North Carolina. I could see them losing at North Carolina. I'll probably go once again for NC State. I'll probably go like 9-3. I don't remember what the overrun was. That is it also 8.5?
8.5. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll go over for NC State. I think they're a solid team, and they kind of benefit from having just a very modest schedule. I mean, their toughest games are the last two, where they'll be more of a well, they'll be a better team in terms of chemistry and really everything by that point. And then of course Wake Forest only a couple weeks ahead of that, and then at Clemson, but I don't think they beat Clemson. So I go over for NC State, probably like a 9-3 again.
Makes sense. And now we go to probably one of the bigger disappointers of last year, the Clemson Tigers, who their schedule this year starts at Georgia Tech, and then you've got Furman and Louisiana Tech. Then you go on the road to Wake Forest, and then play NC State. Two of their tougher games right at the beginning of their schedule for the ACC. Then you've got two road games against Boston College and Florida State. Then you got the game at home against Syracuse before you go into the toughest game of the year on the road, taking on Notre Dame in South Bend. And then you've got Louisville, Miami, and South Carolina to round out the schedule. Clemson, man. Their win total is 10.5. Which means you'd have to pick them to go 11-1 if you want to go over. I think for safety reasons, I think it's more likely I'm going to take the under. I think 11-1 is probably a realistic pick here, but I don't know. I just feel like there's something else with this team where they're just going to trip up at some point to either go 11-1 or 10-2. I still don't trust the quarterback position. I just don't yet. I mean, I might be completely wrong. Like, it might come out and whoever's the quarterback there starts balling out like crazy. I don't know from what I've seen from DJ, it's not been that great. I don't know anything about the other quarterbacks on this roster. So I feel like Notre Dame is probably a loss. And then take your pick out of maybe Wake Forest, Florida State, Miami, even with Tyler Van Dyke and, Mark Cristobal. So I don't know. I would say I'm gonna take the under. I think they'll probably go 11-1, but I'm gonna take the under because I feel like that's the safer play. It's hard for me unless you're like an elite level team. It's hard for me to go over on a 10.5.
Yeah, I didn't actually realize how brutal their schedule was, but
They got some tough road games.
yeah, but this Clemson team. This Clemson team pretty much returns the same defense that it had last season, which kept them in basically every single game that they played. I mean, that Clemson defense was outstanding last year. Now Clemson is dealing with kind of the same problems as Michigan, where they have two brand new coordinators now as their offensive coordinator, Tony Elliott. He left for Virginia, who we'll talk about later in our ACC videos. And Brent Venables, their defensive coordinator, left to go coach Oklahoma. So they now have two brand new coordinators at offense and at defense. That certainly will come with its own issues. But this Clemson team, I think for them, really the solution to them having a really good season is going to be the quarterback spot. And I think DJ is going to be the same case as like remember Kelly Bryant when he was the starter for Clemson, and he was okay, he wasn't great. I mean, DJ, he hasn't been good. He hasn't been like well, he's not been good. And so now you got the brand new hotshot. You got Cade Klubnik coming in as another massive quarterback recruit. He was like 29th overall, I think, in the country. So I think he comes in, he ends up winning the job, and he ends up being a much better quarterback and leading Clemson to some wins. And so going over, these teams, Georgia Tech, I don't care if it's even a neutral site game, which technically it really isn't because it's in Atlanta, Georgia anyway, which is exactly where Georgia Tech is. So
You play Georgia Tech, you beat them.
yeah, either way, it's still going to be an easy win for Clemson. Furman, LA Tech, both should be easy wins. Then you got the brutal stretch here where you got Wake and NC State in back-to-back games.
One on the road.
Yeah, Wake on the road. Those are, I think, 50-50 games. They win one, they probably lose the other one. Boston College, Florida State, neither are great teams. They should beat both of them. Yes, they're road games, which is why I could see them maybe losing one or the other. But I still think they'll win those two. Syracuse, I'm sorry, they're still bad. They're still bad. And then Notre Dame, that's where I think they'll take their second loss, and then the next three, I think they'll end up winning. But I could see them possibly even they have a wide range of possibilities. Clemson could be like 11-1 and also be like 7-5. They have a massive range of possibilities here. But I'm gonna go safe and I'm gonna give them 10-2, so just under that 10.5 mark. Because this is a good team that can certainly make noise, but they got a lot. They got a lot of tough games. They gotta get past teams like Louisville and Miami, and even South Carolina has a decent team this year. Notre Dame, NC State, Wake Forest. I mean, those are all good teams. I mean, all of those are at home except for Wake Forest. But then you also got to play Notre Dame on the road, which
Yeah.
that ain't gonna be easy with how fired up Notre Dame's team is. But I think they'll go at least 10. They'll go 10-2. So I give them just under that. They could go over, but I go 10-2. I think that's more realistic for them.
Speaking of brutal schedules, I had not seen Louisville's schedule until just now. Oh man! All right, let's go through Louisville. They start on the road against Syracuse. On the road against UCF. Then they play Florida State and South Florida. Wow, they played Florida. They played Florida Tuesday. The Florida Tuesday days. Then they play at Boston College, at Virginia, versus Pitt, versus Wake Forest, James Madison, and then they end the year at Clemson, NC State, and at Kentucky. So basically, all their 50-50 coin flip games that you would want to be at home are basically all on the road.
Hmm.
Like they're Syracuse is probably a coin flip game. Boston College might be a coin flip game. Virginia might be a coin flip game. All three of those are on the road. The poor suckers. I'm struggling right now. Their win total is 6.5. So they'd have to get to 7 wins. I do not see 7 wins on this schedule. Even being optimistic. I mean, let's be optimistic. Let's try and get them to 7. Let's say they win the first 4. Let's say they win the first 5 games. So they win the first 5 games, which would mean beating Syracuse, UCF, and Boston College all on the road, not tripping up in any of those, and beating FSU. Then you play at Virginia, which I think is a loss. Pitt and Wake are undoubtedly better teams, in my opinion. Maybe you can get Pitt. That's a 6 win. James Madison is 7. So there could be your 7 if you don't trip up at all. I don't see him winning any of the last 3 games against Clemson or Kentucky on the road, or even NC State. I think those are better teams. The 2 of them are on the road, so I don't see a path to 7 wins unless they just play perfect in their 50-50 road games. So I'm gonna go under. I don't really have a prediction for how under, but I just don't see him getting 7 wins with that schedule. That's a full schedule.
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting off the season at Syracuse. Syracuse might not be a good team, but there's something about. I'm still calling it the Carrier Dome. That's what I will not forever know it as. Um,
Being on the road, especially being on the road, is tricky too.
Carrier Dome in and of itself is just never a fun place to play for anyone, for football or for basketball.
Syracuse fans are nuts. That's all I'll say.
And then the next game is on the road against UCF, and UCF that's not like a bad team either. That's a team that certainly has solid players. They got a good coach in Gus Malzone. And that's a road game. UCF fans get just as crazy as Syracuse fans, probably. If you've watched a game at the bounce house at UCF, you watch like some of those games that UCF plays, they go just nuts about everything. I mean, those people love their football, and UCF has a good team, and they've been good pretty much like every year. So I honestly I think that's a loss for Louisville. I think they'll beat Syracuse, but you never know. But they'll probably lose to UCF. I want to give Florida State a win, but they're just not good, so I can't. USF, they should beat USF. Boston College, who really knows? Flip a coin, somebody's gonna win. Virginia, I give it to the Hokies. Still, Brennan Armstrong is in town. They're not stopping Brennan Armstrong. Pitt no longer has Jordan Addison, but they still have now Keaton Slavis, the USC quarterback. That's a loss. Wake, that's a loss. James Madison, they should beat them. But then they won't win. I basically agree with you. They're not going to win the next 3. So I honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't bowl eligible. But I'll still will give them 6-6 because I mean, really, I see their losses probably being UCF, UVA, Pitt, Wake. Oh no, that would be 7 losses. Never mind. So yeah, I'd have them going 5-7. That's what I got for them. That's just a brutal
They're
schedule, and like I said, they're good recruiting class because they got a really good wide receiver and a really good running back coming in, and I think a really good quarterback too. But that they're not coming in until next year. They got all those guys in next year's recruiting class. They're not getting them this year, and yeah, this is not going to go well for Louisville.
they're a 7-5 team. They have the talent to be good. It's just a brutal schedule. It's just an unfortunate schedule. Moving on, we move on to the Florida State Seminoles, who I could not find on the list for a second because I saw Florida and then no Florida State, but they just listed them as FSU.
Hmm.
I don't know why. All the other states are listed, but whatever. We start with the Quents, who that's an automatic L for Louisville, as we all know. DeQuince is the best team in college football. We
You
got
mean Florida State,
DeQuince,
but yes.
we've got DeQuince, and then we've got at Louisville. Then you got Boston College and Wake Forest at home. Then you go on the road to NC State. You're at home against Clemson and Georgia Tech. Then you're on the road against Miami and Syracuse. Louisiana Lafayette, who's not even a gimme. And Florida, let's see, their win total is the same thing, 6.5. DeQuince, Louisiana Lafayette, and Georgia Tech, I think are the only three gimme wins. I don't see a path for the same thing as Louisville. I don't see a path, or not say I don't see a path for Florida State to get to 7 wins. I mean, at Louisville and at LSU are probably both losses. They could probably beat Boston College at home. That gets them to 4. Wake Forest at home, maybe. At NC State and Clemson are both losses. I think at Miami's a loss. Syracuse maybe 5, and then maybe Florida at home. Even with all those question marks, that still only gets them to 6 wins. I just don't see them getting 7 wins. I'm going solidly under on this team. Their schedule's rough. I think the only free wins are really DeQuince and Georgia Tech at home.
Yeah, Florida State's team just, I mean, you remember the days of Florida State with famous Jameis and the really good days? Remember when the Seminoles were so good? The Jimbo Fisher days? I mean, those were. That was when Florida State was on the top of its game. Now they've gotten, of course, Jimbo Fisher got a just insane amount of money from Texas A&M. And so, well, I mean, if you're smart, you would take the money. You did. And so then Florida State went out and got Mike Norvell, the Memphis head coach, and that has not really worked well. Um, but Florida State's team, it still just is not that good. And last year, I don't think they made a bowl game last year. I think they were 5-7 last year, right? Yeah, because the Florida State game was a game for bowl eligibility, and Florida ended up winning. So I don't even think Florida State will have a chance at a bowl game again because they should beat DeQuince. I'm not high on Boston College; they're still not good. Even though they end up being 6-6 last year, they had a crud non-conference and they won like 2 games in the ACC. I don't know if they'll do that again, but maybe they will. Maybe it'll just be weird like that. Um, and then UL Lafayette, that's not a bad group of 5 team. They could easily beat Florida State. They're not. I don't think they're beating the Gators. Gators are better. Miami, Florida's better, but that's still a rival. And then Georgia Tech, they should beat Georgia Tech. Syracuse, they should beat Syracuse. so, I'm going under for Florida State. I'll still give them 4 wins. I'll give them DeQuince, Boston College, Georgia Tech, and Syracuse. But that's all I could really see them winning. Everything else on here is very difficult, and I think probably out of reach for them to even win.
Exactly. And now we move on to Syracuse, who I figured out. It's called the JMA Wireless Dome now.
Ah, that sounds right.
Which means I'm still calling it the Carrier Dome because there is no way in heck I'm calling it the JMA Wireless Dome. Not a chance. Not a chance. And now we move to Syracuse. Well, it was pretty decently tough schedule. Pretty tough schedule. They start at home against Louisville, then they go on the road to play UCant, and then they play Purdue, Virginia, and Wagner and NC State all at home in a row. Then they alternate home and away for a while. They got at Clemson. This is their brutal schedule. Brutal part of their schedule. NC State, at Clemson, Notre Dame, and at Pitt. And then they play Florida State at home. Then they end the season Wake Forest and Boston College. Win total's 4.5. I see him going probably 4 wins. I see him probably going 4 wins at best because NC State's potentially a win, but probably a loss. At Clemson's a loss. Notre Dame's a loss. At Pitt's a loss. Wake Forest is a loss. Florida State in Louisville and UConn and Wagner. Those are the 4 games that I think they can win. And then maybe they get a win against Boston College, Virginia, or Purdue. I see it's possible that they go 5 wins. I think 4 wins is likely though. I think 4 wins is likely. They trip up a team. They beat the teams they're supposed to in Wagner and UConn and Florida State, and they probably trip up Louisville. So I see probably 4 wins, maybe 5. Sean Tucker's a pretty good running back, so maybe they get a 5th win against Virginia or Purdue when they're not supposed to, like trip somebody up, but probably 4 because their quarterback's still not that good. As much as I personally love Garrett Schrader, not as great a quarterback as we need to get 4 wins. But I give him 4 wins, so under.
Yeah, so obviously Serbensky, most of you know, is the Syracuse fan here. Me personally, I don't. I mean, Syracuse is kind of there for me. I don't really pay much attention to Syracuse football or really Syracuse basketball for that matter. So I don't really know much about this team. I just know that they're not good. That's all I really know. And so I look at this schedule, and UConn. I mean, UConn's bad. Period. They should beat UConn, and Wagner's terrible. And I'll give him Florida State because the Seminoles are just that bad. And then I'll give him maybe Boston College. And yeah, I'd go just under and probably have 4 wins. Because, I mean, Louisville, they could beat Louisville, but who knows? I mean, it's entirely possible they end up beating Louisville, but I still give it to the better team. Purdue, Purdue's just really weird and they go on the road. They just, for some reason, don't know how to play a road game. But um, Purdue's still a better team than Syracuse, so I still think Purdue should win. Virginia will win. NC State should win. They won't win at Clemson. Notre Dame's another team that kind of just has off games, and being at the Carrier Dome or whatever the heck it's called now, still calling it the Carrier Dome. Notre Dame is a weird team on the road too, but I give Syracuse 4-8 realistically, so I go just under for the orange.
Man, do I remember the days when, just a few years back when Eric Dungy led us to upset Clemson at home in the Carrier Dome, and then the next year we were a 4th down conversion away from beating Clemson on the road. Oh man, those were the days. I miss Eric Dungy. I still remember the night. I think it was you who texted me because I was like, it might have been Andrew. I was like, I'm not gonna watch the game. It's a Friday night game. I'm gonna do something else. Clemson's gonna blow us out. And then it's like, dude, it's 10-6 at halftime. I'm like, hang on. And then I watched it, and then Eric Dungy was being tackled, literally extended the ball above his head just to barely get the game stealing 1st down. I think that's given me more joy than any sports moment ever, aside from probably now Michigan beating Ohio State finally. Oh, that was a very joyous moment. I'm probably gonna now watch that game tonight. Yeah. Anyway, let's go to Boston College. I'm done ranting about the good days of Syracuse. Let's go to Boston College, who again is kind of in the same situation for me with their win totals as New York Florida State. Their schedule is Rutgers at home, then at Virginia Tech, then they got.
Maine.
Okay, it's just listed as ME.
Yeah, it's Maine, I think.
It's me. Then they got at Florida State, Louisville and Clemson at home, at Wake Forest, at UConn, Duke at home, at NC State, at Notre Dame, and Syracuse. Their win total is 6.5, which means they'd have to get to 7 wins. The exact same thing with Louisville and Clemson and Florida State. I just don't see them getting to 7 wins. I mean, NC
They'd be
State,
lucky to
Notre
be bowl
Dame,
eligible.
NC State at Notre Dame, at Wake Forest, and Clemson is pretty much 4 losses right there, which means they can only afford to lose one more game. Out of at Virginia Tech, at Florida State, Syracuse, and even Louisville, I feel like they lose two of those games. Maybe even Rutgers. I feel like they lose two of those games. Now, don't get me wrong. They have three gimmies in Duke, UConn, and Maine. But all those other ones, I can see them easily going 6-6. I think 6-6 is probably pretty decent. NC State, like I said, there's four for sure losses on there that I see. And then out of those teams, I think they can win two of them, but I don't think they win three of them. So yeah, give me Boston College either 5-7 or 6-6.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Boston College. Rutgers is kind of one that you kind of just say 50-50. That's anybody's game. They won't. I don't think they'll win at Virginia Tech. I think that's one for new head coach Brent Pry, former Penn State defensive coordinator. We'll talk about him later in the other part of the ACC. But Virginia Tech, I still think they're a better team than Boston College, so I'll give VT that one. BC should beat Maine. Florida State's another 50-50. I don't see them beating Louisville, Clemson, or Wake. They should beat UConn and Duke. And then they lose NC State, Notre Dame. They beat Syracuse. So, I mean, I give them one, two, three, four, and then take your pick between Rutgers or Florida State. So I give them 5-7. They'll be just under a bowl, which is well under under the over under total, which I think you said was 6.5.
Six and a
So
half.
I go 5-7 for Boston College. I think they'll be just short of a bowl game. They're an okay team. They're not much more. This Boston College team is long past its Matt Ryan days, of which I know every Boston College fan really wishes they had the Matt Ryan days back.
Exactly. All right. Well, that is it for ACC Atlantic. Look out for ACC Coastal. Also check out our other videos at Experience Pub on